music of the mysteries conflicting forces. Apollo, Dionysus, under order exists the formless music under illusory images, suffering the true reality, and the truth is tragic, but when touched by a Dionysian magic, life as a static is justified to eternity. Be as I am the eternal original power that calls the whole world into being. Calls the whole world into being. Not an artist, I'm a work of art. Not an artist, I'm a work of art. Not an artist, this is my greatest dignity. Be as I am the eternal original power that calls the world into being. Who killed Socrates and Euripides? Tragic knowledge needs art as protection and remedy. Music is the in itself, the tragic symphony, the unmediated. Will without music, life would be a mistake. I reconcile philosophy and poetry to become Socrates who plays music. This is the wedding of Apollo and Dionysus. I have transformed into Dionysus, taking on his suffering. So I hope you enjoyed Nietzsche's song, The Rebirth of Tragedy, by Alien Clock II, yours truly. I wrote a philosophical exposition to accompany this work, some of the content of which has been adapted from my PhD thesis. And it turned into a manifesto, so I decided to incorporate it into the work as a voiceover. So here we go. What if philosophy had never forgotten its origin in music? How can tragedy be reborn, not as theater, but as song? In this work, I undertake a Nietzschean act, a musical philosophical mythopoiesis, a rebirth of tragedy. In Twilight of the Idols, Nietzsche writes, Without music, life would be an error. For Nietzsche, music is not merely a metaphor for life. In 1872's The Birth of Tragedy, music is understood as will itself, the unmediated Dionysian force underpinning the phenomenal world, metaphysics of the physical world, and the in itself. In The Birth of Tragedy, Nietzsche interprets Greek culture as engendered from the interaction of the conflicting forces of Apollo and Dionysus. Apollonian power is illusion, coherence, the appearance of orderliness of the phenomenal realm. Its Dionysian counterforce exists as formlessness, music, the suffering underpinning the illusions of the phenomenal realm. It is also the originary and eternal artistic power which renders the phenomenal world into existence. Their strife is relentless, with only periodic reconciliation. In The Birth of Tragedy, Nietzsche claims that philology had enabled him to rediscover the lost music of ancient tragic drama, understanding tragedy as the rebirth of myth that renders music to its apotheosis, its mystery most clearly elucidated in the Eleusinian mysteries. In The Birth of Tragedy, myth and philosophy exist as dynamic, cyclical unity. Though he saw Socrates and Euripides as having killed myth, Nietzsche envisioned myth as reborn through Wagner, initially conceiving of Wagner's music as the overcoming of philosophy. Nietzsche would later repudiate Wagner and would undertake his own rebirth of myth, in Thus Spake Zarathustra, a revivification of myth explicitly envisioned as musical. Envisaging music as the supra-rational register of wisdom, his late work sought to rectify philosophy with poetry, to become, quote-unquote, Socrates who practices music. Nietzsche recounts Socrates' final days in The Birth of Tragedy, quote, "As he told his friends in prison, there often came to him the same recurring dream phenomenon, which always said the same thing, 'Socrates, make music.' Up to his last days, he comforted himself with the thought that his philosophy was the highest art of the muses, and did not really believe that a deity wished to remind him of that common popular music. Finally, in prison, in order completely to unburden his conscience, he even agreed to make the music for which he had so little respect. And in this frame of mind, he composed a proemium to Apollo and rewrote some Aesopian fables in verse. It was something resembling a daimonic warning voice which forced him to undertake these exercises. It was his Apollonian insight that he, like a barbarian king, was failing to understand a noble image of a god, and was, through his failure to understand, in danger of sinning against its deity. This mention of the Socratic dream phenomenon is the only sign of an apprehension on his part about the limits of the logical nature. He must have asked himself the following question: perhaps whatever is not intelligible to me is not necessarily immediately unintelligent. Perhaps there is a domain of wisdom which excludes the logician. Perhaps art is even a necessary correlative of a supplement to science." End quote. Such provides the context for understanding my philosophical musical work, Nietzsche's song, The Rebirth of Tragedy. And this philosophical exposition has been adapted from material from my PhD thesis. If we understand, as Nietzsche does, the wisdom of philosophy as supra-rational and as musical, philosophy must be rendered music, must be practiced, and must be lived. Akin to Nietzsche, I understand music as the golden thread, the subterranean metaphysical truth of the phenomenal world, the living pulse underlying the striations of rationality, the affirmation of life that supersedes the purview of rationality. Music dances and sings, alchemizing the suffering of tragedy into affirmative and redemptive power. The philosopher-musician is the one with the audacity to explore the most abyssal depths, transmuting that abyss into musicality. This song is my renewed invocation of that spirit. A musical thinking, a musical philosophizing, a praxis both musical and metaphysical, my own affirmation of tragedy, philosophy that sings, a myth reborn and reimagined for the 21st century. This is my own rebirth of tragedy, transposing philosophy back to its musical homeland, origin, and essence, an experimental artifact with aesthetic, philosophical, and musical value. Nietzsche's song, The Rebirth of Tragedy, is a philosophical event, a harbinger heralding a reimagined philosophical culture. A sonic offering to Nietzsche, Apollo, Dionysus, and the Dionysian unbridled original and eternal wisdom that supersedes reason. Hope you have enjoyed. See you next time for more philosophical musical content. Philosophy Made Music by Alien Clock II. See you next time, Alien Clock.